humid and hot. But it is okay. And I'm only, particularly in the evening and the morning, it's very, very pleasant outdoor. I mean, inside is a little bit sticky and really it is fine, not really big sort of trouble anyway.
Yeah. I was just thinking, Geshe, today is your last class, and it felt like it's so quick. It feels like you just started and now you're finishing.
That's right. So tonight is our last class with this beautiful sutra, very simple yet very profound teaching given by Buddha. Yes. But we will, we'll arrange some other gathering in the future, maybe. That's all right.
That would be great. So Geshe, I was wondering, we've had a couple of questions. If you would like to take time in the beginning or the end to address them, what would you like to do?
So we will do maybe at the end.
Okay.
And then we'll have time for question and answer. That's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, in my email, you sent me that last week, but last week or week before, and I only noticed much later after our class finished, and I noticed, there is a sets of questions.
Yes.
So we'll do that after the the end of today's our gathering.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Yeah.
Okay. So now
30 April, Geshe Tashi, Four Noble Truths.
Okay. So shall we? Yeah. Shall we start the class now? It's I think it's the right time. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So once again, I'm going to more or less repeat some of the points that I raised our last three gatherings at the beginning of the class. That is, the importance of making sure our intention or the motivation to join the class is a positive, a constructive intention or the motivation. And the second one is really giving a little bit of time to ourselves to build, to build within ourselves that our general states of mind have the qualities of stillness and the clarity. So those two, the points that I shared with you in our previous three gathering, and this is what I do all the time wherever I have this kind of opportunity, because I myself, to feel it is very, very helpful in the morning or beginning of this kind of event, very deliberately, very intentionally, the bringing a positive, constructive mind. That can be very, not necessarily, related to any religious, element. It can be just common sense, the general, a positive, constructive mind. As I mentioned the other day, basically we all have the ability and the potential to really hold, experience many different layers of positive thoughts or positive intentions. Then on top of that, people who have spiritual path to follow, on top of that, then listening, reading, contemplation, and so forth, we also have the ability to construct a positive, construct or structure a positive, a constructive mind according to the spiritual path that we are following. Only things that many of us, including myself, is lacking that effort to do that, to bring a positive mind, at the beginning of the day. For example, it seems almost all the major spiritual traditions have this, the culture. For example, in Tibetan Buddhism, when we drink a cup of tea, when we just before lunch, dinner, or breakfast, before do that, make what we call the food offering. It is not really making offering, then the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all those great beings will enjoy our food. It is really mainly to making our mind, to bringing a positive sort of mind before we eat our lunch or dinner or have a cup of tea. And it is same in Christianity, isn't it? They have it called saying the grace. And I was told in the past, those big universities, like Cambridge and Oxford, before they have lunch, there's somebody will say the grace in Latin, and so like that. These are the very skillful way to bring a positive mind, even though what we're going to do, going to have a cup of tea, going to have our lunch or dinner. But before going to do that kind of routine, our activities, but bringing a positive mind, and that is really I found very, very skillful, ways to. So anyway, and here, the people who have spiritual path like teachings of the Buddha, then according to that spiritual path, to construct, to bring a positive mind. And in the Tibetan tradition, most of almost all the the spiritual gathering that we say these 4 lines. The first 2 lines are refuge, which I mentioned the other day, quite not that detailed, but we will have this little bit at the end of today's our reading the text, like more like a conclusion. And then the last 2 lines, cultivation of bodhicitta, the altruistic awakened mind. So I want to say a little bit on that today. No doubt we all have a very strong, what you call the yearning to have such as bodhicitta, the an advanced altruistic mind. But many of us, that stays at the level of just mere aspiration or just mere in a form of prayer, not very, day by day, week by week, month after month, the very bit by bit, step by step, cultivating that mind. We don't do that. I think that is a little bit mistake, because if all the time, year after year after year, cultivation of bodhicitta, uh, if that remains in a just mere uh, aspirational level, or just in a form of prayer, or just in a form of wish, then progress won't be that great. Won't be that great. So to make progress, then really systematically, structurally, need to build a what's called step-by-step cultivation of bodhicitta. And this is which I thought for us important to do that. So the first thing is we need to understand what involves in the bodhicitta. In the bodhicitta, the altruistic awakened mind involves two aspirations. Two aspirations. That two aspirations are aspiration to want to work for the others, for the well-beings of others, and to fulfill that aspiration. Then the second aspiration is aspiration to experience the full enlightenment, or to full enlightenment. So those two aspirations are involved when we say the bodhicitta, or the altruistic awakened mind, to be present, to be experienced within ourselves. Of course, initially, and these two aspirations are in a very, we will experience only with a strong effort, and with the, uh, long term, with the systematically thinking why and how, asking all those questions, and then cultivating the first aspiration, that is aspiration to benefit all living beings. And traditionally, there are two what you call the two ways, or uh, two methods are explained. Two methods are explained by these great Indian masters. Now, I will not go one by one all the steps, but two methods are. The first method is called, the 7-point caution effect. So there are 7 steps. The earlier are the cause, the letters are the result of the earlier ones. Therefore, it is called 7-point caution effect. And that method is taught by several great Indian masters. Then another method is called equalizing and exchanging oneself with others, which Shantideva, this great Indian master, he really, explained in a very detailed, in a very thorough, in his Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, in his text, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. So therefore, really systematically, and also later, when these two methods are reached in Tibet, by some of those great Indian masters and the other Tibetan translators going to India, particularly in the Atisha, in 11th century great Indian master Atisha, taught both methods in Tibet: 7-point caution effect and the and exchanging oneself with others. Both methods are taught by the Atisha, and the later Tibetan teachers, like just in the Gelug tradition, like Tsongkhapa, and some in the other Tibetan Buddhist traditions, really explain more depth and more detail. And some of Tibetan teachers, particularly that I know in the Gelug traditions, these two methods which are taught in India separately, bringing two methods into one, then making 13 steps to cultivate bodhicitta. And those are something we should pay close attention and learn, and then really gradually, as I mentioned earlier, month after month, year after year, step by step, if we work, then, after 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, then we will see some progress in the cultivation of bodhicitta. Otherwise, that will remain all the time, as I mentioned earlier, just in a form of prayer or in a wish or in a just strong aspiration. Though having strong aspiration to have altruistic awakened mind is amazing, but we need to make progress. And this is what I just want to say briefly, to the group, something it is important to put some effort to cultivate bodhicitta. So now, we will say those 4 lines to help us, really to help us, to hold refuge, mind taking refuge, and the hold the altruistic awakened mind. Oh yeah. Sanje chöda tsoje chonama la chanju pado dane japso che dage chenso jebe tsonama je dola penje sanje dobara sho Sanje chöda tsoje chonama la chanju pardo dane japso che dage chenso jebe tsoma manje dola penje sanje dobara sho. Sanje chöda tsoje chonama la chanju pardo dane japso che dage chenso jebe tsonama je dola penje sanje dobara sho. Oh yeah, thank you. So I already briefly mentioned in importance of giving maybe 7-8 minutes to ourselves to cultivate, to make our general states of mind have the qualities of stillness and the clarity. There are many different ways using very simple techniques, breathing, and so forth. And that is something important. So I already mentioned that. So now today I'm going to straight away going to move to the reading the sutra itself. And so the last Saturday, and our main focus, the reading main focus was on the out of the 4 noble truths, which I mentioned why these 4 topics are called noble truths. They are called noble truths. Those people like, who have direct realization of emptiness, selflessness. To those people, these four topics, they see as they are. They see the dukkha, suffering, as a suffering. They see the origins of dukkha as a, origin, and so on and so forth. Therefore, these four topics are four noble truths, noble to those, beings who have direct realization of emptiness, not necessarily need to be fully awakened beings, but have the direct realization of emptiness, direct realization of selflessness, direct realization of impermanence. Those beings, that can be lay people, that can be men, women, Easterner, Westerner, black, white. These surface differences will not make any difference to understand these four topics as they are. So therefore they are called four noble truths. And we last Saturday, our main focus was in the third noble truth, which is the noble truth of the cessation. Cessation of the first, which is suffering, and the second, which is origins of suffering. And as I briefly mentioned the other day, for in the Buddhist scriptures, those philosophical texts, they mentioned, the best way to approach the teachings of the Buddha, best way to approach the teachings of the Buddha is, through seeing, understanding, the possibility of the cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering. Possibility to experience within ourselves that cessation can take place. We can experience, I and you, and we can experience that cessation. Cessation of what? Cessation of suffering and origins of suffering. When that possibility is realized, understood, then the following or the making progress in the spiritual journey won't be that much struggle. Won't be that much struggle. Some of those Indian masters' texts explained, the follower of the teachings of the Buddha. There can be two sort of groups, groups in the sense, two different mental, mental capacity or mental abilities. One is called sharp faculty, one is called not that sharp faculty. So sharp faculty here refers to people who really look at, research, analyze, is it really possible me to experience that cessation, liberation from dukkha and the origins of dukkha? Through the analysis, through the investigation, through the research, when they see that is possible, then they follow the journey, follow the path, which today we are going to talk. We are going to talk. But the second group, where they don't have that much strong, sharp faculty. So for those groups, initially more like a, assuming, sort of believing that cessation is possible. Cessation of dukkha and the origins of dukkha is possible because Buddha have explained and some subsequent Buddhist teacher had explained, and because there's no reason these people will, not to tell the truth. So, through that initially to follow the teachings of the Buddha. Out of those two, the first one is more, powerful, more stable, and will make, progress will be much greater than the second one. And that's what these teachers have said. Therefore, the third noble truth is something very, very important to explore. What is cessation? What is liberation? Is it really possible me to experience liberation? Is it really possible me to experience cessation? And even if not possible completely in this lifetime, but can make I can make progress towards that cessation, and that is something very important. Now then, we briefly started last Saturday the fourth noble truth, which is the path that leads to that cessation. Cessation will not take place. The cessation of suffering and origins of suffering will not take place within ourselves without causes or disconcord causes. It will only take place with the causes and right causes. And that is something, important too. So then what that Buddha taught, as we saw in the first part of the reading when we read the sutra, the background of the sutra, Buddha said, when Buddha taught to those 5 followers, that he had to realize these, the 5 steps, 5 things: visions, knowledge, peace, direct knowledge, and enlightenment through these noble eightfold paths. And this is our today's little bit explanation on that. So that I already mentioned noble eightfold path can be, easier way, people who are relatively new, because it might be a little bit difficult to hold on. Then I mentioned look at in 3 groups: 2 in the wisdom, 3 in ethics, and the other last 3 in concentration. And that is looking to that group, and it is called 3 trainings, which I mentioned the other day. Generally speaking, it is quite common in the ancient Indian spiritual tradition as a 3 trainings. But the unique comes, as I mentioned, when we explore and the way in which the nature of existence, how things and events exist, including our identity. That is, the emptiness or the selflessness, anathema theory. Theory of selflessness, the theory of emptiness, then make big difference in the practice of 3 trainings. Of course, there are some differences without that, but generally speaking, very minor. When the concept, when the theory of emptiness, theory of selflessness is, explained in the practice of 3 trainings, particularly in this case, mainly in the wisdom, then the other 2, Shila or the ethics and the concentration, will practice also, differs from the non-Buddhist other ancient Indian spiritual traditions. That is also I briefly mentioned the other day, which to us to explore this theory of selflessness, anatma, theory of emptiness, shunyata. There are four philosophical schools are taught in according to the Tibetan Buddhist the traditions, and it seems in India, uh, even during the Buddha's time, or at least in the later after Buddha passed away, over the period of time, great Indian Buddhist masters have different understanding, different interpretation, different explanation on this topic, which is the selflessness or uh, anatma. And this is something we should explore. And it is. I'm not saying, although in the Tibetan tradition, it is this theory of emptiness is explained in a more hierarchical structure, saying the Madhyamika Pasangaka view is the most definitive or most profound, subtlest view. But for us, as a trainer, as a learner, then it is very important to to explore one by one, not saying, oh, this is the highest, this is the advanced, this is the finest, not in that fashion. Really, all these great masters, Indian masters, they all look at these different theories in a many different angles, and also many different with many different topics and different mental dispositions, different mental dispositions. So for us, immediately saying, I am in this highest, ready to go to the highest and the finest, that sometimes won't work. So what is useful is, to try to understand, these different interpretation on these two theories. Selflessness, anatma, and emptiness. So I won't go any further of that because that's not our today's main topic. And I'm sure many of you have heard or have read and received teachings from great teachers and have read many great books. I'm just giving, the mistakes that I've made, and sharing you not to make the same mistakes. That's what I'm saying. I sometimes I mourn this little bit. I was born in Tibetan family, and like many Tibetans we do, being Buddhist is like our birthright, which is not. You know, and being Buddhist, becoming Buddhist is not birthright, but we treat it in that way, and which is mistake. And similar to that, I sometimes I talk to my friends, I wish I haven't born in a Buddhist family, but same time I really wish I had not be born in a Buddhist family, but to matter Buddhist teachings in my the youth time, then go through to have the chance to explore coming from the outsider, not as a born in that way. So sometimes I feel Westerners, you have, in a certain extent, have a better chance to really to explore these different, topics, different teachings, not to take it as a, as I said, as a birthright, which is not helpful to approach this. So, when I was in London, I for many years, since 1997 1998, I think His Holiness Dalai Lama came to London, and he gave teaching on Four Noble Truths. And that time, one lunchtime, one of his attendants was searching me, and I was with some of my friends having my lunch in a cafe. And he gave teaching in central London. There is a what is that hall called? There's quite a famous hall, not Royal Albert Hall, but there's another one. And so there were many nice cafes around, and lunch break. In those days, he gave teaching morning and afternoon. And I went with some of my friends to have a lunch, and we ended up in a nice cafe. That hall is middle of so-called London City, where all the banks are, buildings are around. And just middle of my lunch, it was, I think June or July, very, very nice sandwich. But middle of my sandwich, to one of His Holiness bodyguard, a Tibetan bodyguard, came searching me, and I have to leave my half sandwich and go to see him. And fortunately, he was having his lunch too, and I had a little bit portion of his lunch. He insists me to have a little bit what he's having. So, and what he said is, why I'm bringing that is, he said, now you're here and there are some young Tibetans, and you should lead some classes, Buddhist classes to the Tibetans. And I said, definitely I'll do that. So from then, that was 1997 or 8, from then until, the 2018, not whole year, and from April to November, and one Saturday a month, not every Saturday, one Saturday a month, not very much, but struggling to bring people. So sometimes I tease them, but they're quite often express they are born as a Buddhist because they are Tibetan. I said that's wrong, that's a mistake, So anyway, I don't know why I'm chattering these things, but it doesn't matter. So today I want to talk a little bit on the second group. Out of the three groups, I want to talk a little bit on the second group, which is ethics. Ethics. So that is something very, very important part of our practice. When Buddha taught, he taught his teachings quite often. These great Indian masters, the Nalanda masters, summarize into two, and in English, these two what you call the topics are called method and wisdom, or skillful means and the wisdom. In Tibetan, tapdam sherab, skillful means or methods and the wisdom. So wisdom, which we briefly look at in that, out of the three trainings, that first training, where out of 8 noble eightfold parts, first 2, right view and right intention. So the second one, which is the ethics, that really captures out of the two groups of trainings that we need to do, is the methods or the skillful means, tapjicha. And that is what, for us, we have to have. Otherwise, wisdom alone will not take us all the way, and also skillful means, methods alone will not take us that far. Having two, wisdom and methods, having two, together in our practice, in our training, in our spiritual journey, then that will take us all the way where we want to go. And this is the ethics comes into practice. And some of you have heard this, the what's his name, Chandakirti, a great Indian master, 7th century, wrote amazing several texts, to understand Nagarjuna's, the Nagarjuna's teachings on emptiness. And Chandakirti nicely explained this one, but he said, kunzup tene shoyang kabu jeju ba ngangbe jabu tene jo ngangbai dundo tanda gewe nungji shukdok ki gewe yonde jazu paru chokdo. I think it's on his Madhyamika Avatara, the entering into the middle way, in the end of the 6th chapter, the chapter where he explained emptiness. And these 4 lines, very nice analogies, with the nice, beautiful analogies, captures this point, which I'm just mentioning. So it's saying, the analogy is those birds, those big birds, who migrate, during the winter time from one continent to another continent. To migrate and to cross these big, oceans or long distance, these birds need, what's called both wings are very, very strong and healthy. They are unable to cross the ocean or the long distance, just having one wing very strong and healthy. And that is the analogies that Chandakirti used. So these birds which migrate from one continent to another continent with the 2 healthy wings, Shoyang Karpo, Shoyang Shokpa, that means the wings, these 2 wings. Karpo Jejurpa, that means very widely spread and healthy. Shoyang Karpo Jeju. Ngangbe Jabutini, Kyo Ngangbai. Ngangba, those big birds, swans, or those big birds, Ngangba. Gebo, who leads the that migration, distance to one place to another place. Those leaders, when they fly and make the air to as you know much better than me those things. When these birds, when they go into flock, they 1 or 2 go in the first, then others to follow, like the and in the Olympic, or when they have bike racing and they always follow or somebody's behind. And the main reason is they want to cut the the air, and then they have to the second one or the behind have to put less effort. So like that. So the first one, that birds to cut the air and have this amazing due to having healthy, the what you call the wings, 2 wings. With the power of that 2 healthy wings, those leaders, birds leads to migrations, and they are able to cross the oceans. So similar to that, what it's saying is for us to cross ourselves from the unenlightened to the enlightened, and to lead these living beings, unenlightened living beings, to enlightened state, we need both wings, very, very healthy and strong. And 2 wings are methods, that is wisdom realizing emptiness, and the second wing, the next other wing is, wisdom, that is wisdom realizing emptiness. The other wing is the method, that is skillful means. That skillful means here comes to the this, ethics, practical ethics. So the, here what it's mentioned, those three, right, the right action, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So, all these skillful means, activities, for example, traditionally list as 6 perfections: practicing generosity, practicing ethics, practicing patience, practicing, the joyous effort. Or, all these activities, serving others, working for others. And these are the skillful means. Skillful. And these will occur when we have, a when we live our life ethically. So living life ethically, bottom line is minimum. Bottom line is intentionally, deliberately not harming others. That's a really minimum. When we say I'm practicing ethics, I'm living ethical life, the minimum, the bottom line is intentionally, deliberately not harming others directly and indirectly. Even if there are opportunities, chance opportunities and occasions are there to explore, to take advantages from others' lives, from others' possession, but very deliberately, intentionally not doing that. That is really, really important. And many of you, many of us may live in that way. But I always tease this. I always tease this, and it is part of my truthful, the explanation. I say, it is many of us not to harm others deliberately, or not to, uh, cheat others, or do something bad to others. It is mainly due to the circumstances, due to our upbringings, due to our environment, due to where we live. Not necessarily we are trained, we really understand that is important. Not harming others is important. Many of us are not in that way because, I will give you one example. When I first came to the West, initially to France, 3 years, 1991. At that time, I don't have television because I was staying and living in a monastery, Nalanda monastery. 1994, when I moved to London, then I've got television, and then soon after, I think 1995-6, this that civil war broken in the Balkans, Albania, Serbia, this, and you may remember this, and not only this, but after Rwanda and all this, when I see that constantly people saying, these we have been living like neighbors, friends for generations, but now we are killing each other. Muslim kills, what you call the Christian kills Muslim, and so on and so forth. Though we lived, for quite harmoniously for, many years. That really shows collectively, past they live very harmoniously as neighbors. It is simply the situation or circumstances. But now they are unable to, that time when they are unable to do that because the situation changed. and they start to kill each other. Now, another nice example I will tell you is this. I'm sure some of you have heard many times from me, but I'm still having this very strong, clear, the what you call the image in my head. English people or British people have this reputation of queuing to everything. If you are waiting a bus, even if there are not more than 3 people, they will queue, and and so on and so forth. And I teach them, I like that you're this queuing the bus, but when I was in India, 1970s and 80s, and around this area, if you missed the bus in front of you because of there's no enough seat, you have to wait another hour, or sometimes it won't come maybe 2 or 3 hours. So then when that kind of situation comes, then queue won't be there. So what I'm talking about is many of our current, that kind of positive manner, that kind of, practicing nonviolence, mainly due to the situations, due to the circumstances, not very much our own understanding how it is important. So this is what I want to say a little bit on that. And so then on top of that, the bottom line is deliberately, intentionally not harming others. Then the second, stage will be very deliberately, very intentionally supporting others, helping others. That will come. So here, ethics really, from the Buddhist point of view, ethics really started from these 2 levels, from these 2 stages. The first one is the bottom line is deliberately not harming others. And His Holiness Dalai Lama says very often, that those 2 what I've just mentioned, these are not religious, point of view. These are not some kind of spiritual point of view. These are something basic human qualities that we need to nurture, whether we have a religion or not. Deliberately, intentionally not harming, and if it is possible, deliberately, intentionally supporting others. Then on top of that, then we can practice our, for example, people who follow teachings of the Buddha, then we can practice, right livelihood. We can practice right speech. We can practice right action. This will come. Then we can take vows, monastic vows, but the bodhisattva vows and Vajrayana vows. Without that 2 very basic bottom line, which I've just mentioned, without these 2, very, very difficult to take bodhisattva vows, to take monastic vows. For me, to take a full monastic, ordination, without those 2 bottom that which I mentioned, I can't take my full ordained vows, because to take that full ordained vows, those 2 are the fundamental, the base. So therefore, it is very, very useful to sometimes, we need to go to the basic level. Sometimes we, practicing year by year, and we feel I'm more advanced, I'm now more mature, and so on and so forth. We start to lose the bottom, the fundamental, the base. We start to lose that. And that is not very helpful. So this, the second group out of 3 groups, the ethics is very, very important. And which I mentioned, out of those two, two wings, wisdom and method. Methods here, the ethics. And the ethics can be practiced in many different layers, many different stages. And the bottom line is deliberately not harming others, and possible, if it is possible, deliberately, intentionally supporting others. And on top of that, then other ethical practice can be done. Okay, now I want to tell you my own silly observation. Many of my observations are very silly observations. So I want to tell you one silly observation that I did. That was around 2005, 6, 7, before 2008 financial crash. And the BBC had run program called ethical living, because there was some kind of, what is the right word in English? Trend developed, environment and all those things. And the BBC run, the program several years, from many different angles. And this guy, I can't remember his name, but I can still see his face in front of me, quite tall, young guy. And he was the main person and that is related to, not using car to go to shopping, to go to all those things. And, on the one hand, I found it's really interesting to see, but on the other hand, it's a big fuss he was making, not just using car and living. That is called ethical living. Although it's nice to see not using car, and that will reduce the pollution and so on and so forth. But then when the financial crash came, that program completely disappeared because, and also like that. So anyway, that's the one, my silly observation. And another observation that I've done is this, which I like very much, was in the UK, one channel, television channel, Channel 4. They did one, I think 2-3 years every winter, those people who don't have any name or high position, but doing good work in the community. And there's one program which I really, when I watched that really, I felt how amazing, how nice. I'm sure there are many, but one, and that is, they did in Glasgow, in Scotland. And in Glasgow, so one part of the Glasgow, a group of relatively elderly men, but they are, a bin collector, dust, the dustbin collector. And in that, there were 5 or 6 of men. Every morning they go with this big truck and those heavy, those dustbin which we left, just on the pavement, and they pull and put into empty. And in that, there's one man, he collects broken bicycles people throw, and he collects that. And what he does, whenever he has spare time, he repairs, he takes all those broken bicycle throwaway or whatever he get it, he takes to his home. He hasn't got a big room, a big house, very small, but he kept, and he repairs. And whenever a nice, workable bike came, he finished, then he take and give it to the young boys or girls, very deprived community. And I thought that was really, really amazing things to do, things to do. That it helps two things. First of all, it helps the environment, because otherwise all those broken bikes in that area will be thrown away, and that really, big waste. And another, he really helps to others, to those deprived family who don't have enough money to buy new bikes. He go and take and give it. And when I saw that, that was really, really good example for us, something that we can, small things that we can do. So practicing ethics. When we say practicing ethics, should not be understood something, not eating in the evening, or, those are something useful, but practicing ethics can be looked, can be done in a many different levels, in a many different ways, and which we should, we should pay attention to that. And that is really more like a second group, ethics. I will not go to explain what is right speech, right action, right livelihood. You all know what does that mean. For example, right livelihood. What, the money or the salaries that we gain. Of course, we receive salary because we work, but also how we spend. And all these things, to pay attention to, how, as minimum as possible, not to harm that to others. What we have got, and how we spend, how we gather things, our basic necessities, and so on and so forth. So right livelihood. There are some criteria are mentioned in the Buddhist text, but that is not that important. What is important is our paying attention to how we live our life. If we pay attention, most of the mistakes that we make in our life, we will see. We will understand, oh, that's not really right to do. Lack of attention, then we constantly make mistakes in our daily living. Okay, so that is. Now in the third group, which is called concentration. Concentration in the right, in the Noble Eightfold Path, those last three, right effort, right mindfulness, and the right concentration. Right concentration. That is not unique. That is not unique in Buddhism. Ancient Indian spiritual traditions, they also have all these three. It is not unique. But these three, or in other words, concentration, used as a vehicle to nurture ethics and wisdom. Having, as I mentioned at the beginning of the class, having, stillness and the clarity in the essence of concentration, having within ourselves, having a qualities of mental qualities of stillness and the clarity, and use that kind of stillness and clarity as base, then to nurture ethics like compassion, altruism, nurtured wisdom. That's why, out of those two very, very helpful tools, shamatha and vipassana. Although some traditions they say, there is no fixed sequence out of these two which should come first, which should develop first. But many of the great Indian masters, they have clearly stated there is some kind of, sequence. First cultivate shamatha, then cultivate vipassana. Vipassana. And that's what here we're talking about, Vipassana in the sense wisdom, realizing impermanence, emptiness, nature of dukkha, and that is what here. So stillness, or in other words, in the out of those three, trainings in our mental level, the the concentration really helps to nurture ethics and the wisdom. Although they all support each other, they complement to each other, but sometimes if we look at it in that fashion, then it is quite helpful. So that is here, what you call the how three trainings, and within three trainings to see the noble eightfold paths, So what Buddha said in here, the three, either three trainings we call, or the noble eightfold paths. When the noble eightfold paths are cultivated, nurtured, or ourselves live our life with the noble eightfold paths, then the cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering will experience within ourselves. So that is the third noble truth. So out of the fourth noble truth, what that will do, that will lead us to experience the third noble truth, which is the cessation. And cessation of what? Cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering. So that is, how these four noble truths can be, can be understood. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to briefly mention understanding of Four Noble Truths will help us to understand refuge, to cultivate the mind taking refuge. And I will just say briefly on that, which is important. When we understand the first two noble truth of suffering and the origins of suffering, when we understand that is taking place, that is, these suffering and origins of sufferings are present within ourselves, or we are in that nature. When we understand that, that understanding will lead us to search a solution to be free from suffering and origins of suffering. In other words, that understanding is like the ignition key, like in the car or motorcycle. When we turn the ignition key, then release the brake and press the clutch, or then car start to move. Similar to that, understanding of the first two noble truths, relation to ourselves, our current existence, will lead us to search the solution. Then, the solution is the actual solution is the third noble truth, that cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering. But even if there is a cessation, but if there's no means, there's no ways to get to experience that, then just existence of cessation is not necessarily something amazing. Then that will take us to search the fourth noble truth, which is the path that we today discuss. And these two, when we understand the third noble truth and the fourth noble truth, then we will understand the three jewels: Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Understanding of the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering, that understanding will lead us to understand possibility of to experience enlightenment, to experience full enlightenment. And that is the out of the three jewels, that is the what you call the Buddha. And, understanding of that is full, that kind of cessation is, possible. That kind of cessation is, that kind of cessation is completely possible to experience within myself. Then that help us to understand Dharma, the actual Dharma. Out of three jewels, actual Dharma is actually refers to that cessation. When we say Dharma, actual Dharma is that cessation. Then path that leads to that cessation is that means or the methods. The actual Dharma is that cessation itself. And when we see ourselves to become, become a person to experience that cessation, then what we see the Buddha, and also we see the Sangha. So the understanding of the last two Noble Truths will help us to understand the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And the understanding of the first two Noble Truths that help us to understand why we need to seek refuge. So in the traditional Buddhist text, the refuge is explained. Refuge, is explained under saying when we have these two causes, the two causes will lead us to have refuge. What are the two causes? Two causes are understanding of the nature of samsara, or nature of dukkha and the origins of dukkha. That is the first. And the second is understanding of the three jewels. When you have these two understandings, then we will have the refuge. We will have the refuge. So that is here in the Four Noble Truths. We'll have all these things. Okay, I'm going to move. Now then, remaining text. Now I'm going to drive Ferrari, okay? So you must be ready. That means I'm going to run quite fast. Now, out of the 4 pages, now our reading is in the 3rd page. In the 3rd page, the 2nd paragraph, we finished up to there. Up to there, in the main body of the text, sutra, what we have done so far, Buddha had introduced nature of the first Noble Truth, second Noble Truth, third Noble Truth, and fourth Noble Truth. That is the one round, first round. He just simply introduced, this is suffering, these are the suffering, these are the origins of suffering, this is the cessation, these are the path which leads to cessation, and that is what out of, now now we are looking at the 3rd paragraph. 3rd paragraph, and the 4th paragraph. From here, what is happening here is, Buddha is simply, sorry, I'm jumping my page. We are not in the 3rd page, we are in the 2nd page. So in the 2nd page, in the 4th paragraph, then, after Buddha introduced in the first round the 4 Noble Truths, then in the 2nd round, Buddha explained what to do with each Noble Truth. Each Noble Truth. Now, if you look at here, in the 2nd page, in the 4th paragraph, here it says this. This is the Noble Truth of suffering. Thus, Bhikshu, in the regard of things unheard before, there rose in me a vision and so on and so forth. Then what Buddha said in the next paragraph, this Noble Truth of suffering is is to be fully understood. So from our side, what the Buddha said is, when he introduced in the first round, when he introduced these are the dukkha, these are the suffering. So what we should do with regard to the suffering, what Buddha said in here should be understood fully. So with regard to the first noble truth, our, our activity is to understand the dukkha in its full, what you call the complete and fully, not surface, not, partial, fully and completely. And this one is important, full and complete, because gross levels of dukkha, suffering, can be understood relatively easily. But subtle levels of dukkha may take long time to understand as a dukkha, as a suffering. And this is what here, when he used the term fully, to be fully understood. And that is something very, very important one. And that's one thing. And then the third round, when you come to the third round regarding to the first noble truth, in here, the line that I'm reading now here, paragraph, this noble truth of suffering has been fully understood. What does that mean? Once we completely, fully, understand noble truth of suffering, then that is end. There isn't more that we need to understand what is dukkha, what is suffering. Once we understand fully and completely, that's the end. And that understanding will not reverse. That understanding will not decline. When we fully, completely, understand the dukkha and the origins of dukkha. And this is what Buddha taught in the third round with regard to the first noble truth. So in other words, first noble truth, there is a introduction, what is the noble truth of dukkha, and the second round, what to do with it regarding to the dukkha, and the third, once we have understood dukkha fully and completely, that is the end. There won't be new dukkha, new suffering that we need to understand further. And that is the three round. Now, in the second, regarding to the second noble truth of origins of dukkha. And here what the Buddha said, after he introduced the noble truth of dukkha, suffering, origins of dukkha, what he said in here, the line starts in, this noble truth of origins of dukkha is to be abandoned. So now, origins of dukkha, when we understand ignorance, in this sutra, what Buddha said, Buddha introduced 3 or 4 different cravings, or normally attachment, aversion, and ignorance are origins of dukkha. So then what should we do with them? And here Buddha said, should be abandoned, should be eliminated with regard to the second noble truth. Now, abandoned, eliminated will not take place unless if we apply the antidotes. For example, to abandon anger, hatred, we have to apply the antidote within ourselves, within our mental continuum. We need to apply antidote. So so abandonment of attachment, aversion, and ignorance will only take place when we apply the antidote to these mental states. And antidotes are actually the opposite of these afflictions. For example, antidote to apply to anger is love, tolerance. These are the antidotes. Antidotes for the attachment is applying understanding of nature of impermanence or some other antidotes and so forth. So that's what here with regard to the second noble truth. In the second round, first introduce what are the origins of dukkha, and in the second round, what to do with regard to the origins of dukkha. These should be abandoned by applying the antidote. And in the third round, once these origins of dukkhas are completely abandoned, completely abandoned, they will not occur later or sometime future. Once they are eradicated from our psyche, from our mental continuum, through the application of antidote, then they will not, reoccur something in the future. And that is in the third round with regard to the second noble truth that Buddha had explained. And with regard to the third noble truth, that is the cessation. And as you can see at the end of that page 3, the last paragraph here, Buddha said, this noble truth of the cessation of suffering is to be realized, So what to do with regarding to the third noble truth? We should experience it. We should realize it, and that is what we need to do. Cessation of suffering and origin of suffering should be realized in the sense experience within ourselves. Make it happen within ourselves, that cessation take place within ourselves. And that is what with regard to the third noble truth. And that means liberation and in further enlightenment, And then that is in the second round with regard to the third noble truth. That means it should be realized. It should be experienced. And in the third round, with regard to the third noble truth, what Buddha said here, as you can see, this noble truth of cessation of suffering has been realized. Once liberation or cessation, complete cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering is taking place within our mental continuum, then that is it. It will not decline. It will not reverse once we completely, fully experience or realize, actualize this cessation. And that's what Buddha taught in the third round with regard to the third noble truth. Now the last noble truth, which is the noble truth of the path which leads to cessation. And that's what here Buddha said is. This noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering is to be developed, to be cultivated. So noble eightfold path should be cultivated, should be developed. And these words are important. Developed, cultivated. These are giving us something we need to do. This will not occur. This will not going to take place within ourselves, just mere prayer or just with the wish. We have to put effort, need to cultivate, need to develop with regard to the fourth noble truth, which those noble eightfold path. And in the third round, once the noble eightfold paths are fully and completely cultivated within ourselves, then that is it. These will not decline. These will not reverse. These will not disappear. This will stay with us. So that is in the third round with regard to the fourth noble truth. So Buddha taught like that to those 5 followers. First, introduce each noble truth. Then second round, to explain what to do with regard to each noble truth. And in the third round, once they have done for example, with regard to the first noble truth, once they have fully understood the suffering, then they said that Buddha said that is it. There's no more in the future, no more new suffering that you need to understand, which you haven't understood before. And the same as the ones you abandoned the origins of suffering, that's it, and so on and so forth. So Buddha taught this very beautiful, these 4 topics in these 3 stage, the introduction, what to do, and once you have done, and what is the result. And that's called 3 rounds and 12 ways. So that is something useful. Okay, now we are running out our time. But just I want to point it at one important at the end of the this not end after finishing the main topic, then Buddha making like a conclusion. This big paragraph which Buddha said, "So long, bhikshus, as my knowledge and vision of these 4 noble truths, as they really are, in their 3 phases and the 12 aspects, 3 phases I've mentioned, 12 aspects I've mentioned, was not thoroughly purified in this way, I do not claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world." With devas and then, but then next line, but when my knowledge and vision of these 4 noble truths, as they really are in these 3 phases and 12 aspects, was thoroughly purified in this way, then I claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world. That is very, very important. What Buddha said, I will not claim I'm fully awakened, I'm enlightened, if what I've said with regard to these 4 noble truths, if they are not correct, then I will not claim I'm awakened being, I'm enlightened being. If what I have said with regard to the 4 noble truths in these 3 phases and 12 ways are correct as they are, then I will claim I'm enlightened, I'm fully awakened. So, why I'm saying this is important, you don't need to go to see High Lama to ask Lama to do observation whether I'm enlightened being or not. This is very clearly stated. And because I met many people claiming I'm enlightened being, I'm fully awakened, I'm enlightened, and I'm not saying I don't know whether maybe they are true. They are, with regard to from the Buddhist point of view, whether you are fully awakened or not, demarcation is Buddha clearly stated in here with regard to the 4 noble truths. And this is clearly, detailedly explained one of these great Indian master, Dhammakirti, in his Pramanavartika in 2nd chapter, when he explained the historical Buddha as a reliable person, trustworthy person. He explained with regard to the Buddha's understanding of the 4 noble truths. Buddha's understanding of the 4 noble truths. And here we haven't, it is not mentioned in here, 4 noble truths also can be explained with each noble truth with the 4 different aspects. and there are 16 aspects. Each noble truth can be explained with 4 aspects. So that is something important. That's something important to the last bit. I usually, talk to people, they're saying whether you are fully awakened or not, because this Dhammakirti, this master, he clearly said to, when he, like more in the argument, he said, enlightened being or not is not characterized whether that person is able to see long distance or not. There are big birds he said, there are big birds see long distance, but they are not enlightened beings. So, whether it's enlightened beings or not is with regard to the Four Noble Truths. With regard to the Four Noble Truths, then if we see the Four Noble Truths as they are, then we can say, I'm enlightened. Buddha had said that. Why not we also have the same right to say that? No? Okay, sorry. We run out our time, so I will not take the questions. Maybe we'll do it sometime other times, if there are more questions, but we are running out of time. So I want to say first, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And thank you for participating, listening, and contemplating, and all those things. So thank you for that. And shall we say short dedication? Oh, yeah. Kare rave korve shingamade pendan dewa malu jungwe chere sewa tenzin jansoye shabe sede pado tenjuro che. Oh, yeah. You who uphold the secure of moral way, who serves as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Majugota's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, savior of my master and others, your disciples, please live long. Chanjo semjo rembo che, ma je panama je juro je, jeba nyamba meba yang, kone kongdu pewa shu. Oh, yeah. Thank you, everybody. And have a
Thank you,
good day.
Geshe-la.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Have
Thank
a good
you.
day.
So much,
Wonderful. Thank you,
Geshe-la.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Really.
Geshe-la, for the teaching.
Thank you.
Thank you. Long
you.
life, good health, good health.
Stay well.
Yes.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Geshe.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Come back soon, Geshe-la.
Yes, I will. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.